Welcome. My name is Katura Capadonia, and I'm the outreach consultant at the Southern Tier Library System. I'm very excited today to welcome Nick Tanzi to present his workshop, AI in the Library, the Current Landscape. Nick is the Assistant Director of the South Huntington Library and is a nationally recognized library technology consultant and author. So welcome, Nick. If anyone has questions, please feel free to type them in the chat as they come up, and there will be time at the end for us to ask Nick those questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the intro. I hope everybody's doing well today. So AI in the library, I'm sure we all feel like it's something we didn't talk very much about, and that would probably feels like one of the only things we talk about. But what I'm hoping for today is really to give you a sense of where things are, where they're going, go over some kind of common language, make sure we're all kind of on the same page here. With that in mind, I'm going to cover some common definitions and terminology of AI. At first, it may sound very technical, but I'm going to walk it back a little bit and don't want to spend a ton of time on definition. So if you feel like your eyes are starting to glaze over, I promise you we're moving on. It's just a sense of kind of setting all of our expectations and getting familiar with the terminology. I want to talk about how AI is impacting our libraries. It really does have an impact. It's already in our libraries in a lot of ways. AI is a subtle technology that maybe we don't always see it when it's there, when it's present. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the tools that are out there that honestly, that many of us are playing with right now, that our patrons are certainly using. Want to do a little bit of future casting, say what's right around the corner, not too far out ahead, but certainly some of the things that are coming down the pike. And then, of course, to answer your questions, I think it's good practice where if you have a question, just drop it in the chat. If it gets answered along the way before we get to Q&A, I think that's great. If we don't, then, we'll address it. But sometimes that's more helpful than, potentially forgetting what you're going to ask or, or being in a rush to try to type it at the end. I'm a big fan of caveats whenever we're doing a topic like AI that is fast moving. And to be clear, AI is something that is moving fast right now. There's a lot of unanswered questions. There's lots of very good questions that go unanswered about copyright, AI ethics. There's not a lot of laws governing this stuff. In a lack of regulation, things are moving fast, things are changing. There's a lot of uncertainty. That's partially what causes a lot of anxiety with this technology. I think it's always helpful to talk about and let you know, like, where's your speaker coming from on this topic? What is their own bias? What is their own feelings? And on the topic of AI, I'm somebody that's kind of that unlikable but persuadable middle, where I can see the value in the technology. I can see, how it can be used, and there's a certain sense of excitement, but I have both eyes open and I see a lot of problems with the technology. So I am persuadable. If I get on an elevator and you give me a pitch about how AI is evil, I'm probably walking out of that elevator feeling pretty down. But if you're somebody who's an AI evangelist and you're very excited about it, I can pick up that enthusiasm. But there's a lot to be concerned about. There's a lot to be excited about. And finally, it's okay to be bewildered. I know, there's a lot of this, and I'll show you like my Twitter feed from the last 24 hours where you can see that there's so much hype and so much, salesmanship going on. And it's okay to be bewildered. There's not a lot of experts in an emerging technology that hasn't really been in the public consciousness this long. And the technology is going to get more accessible as it goes along. So bewildered is perfectly natural state of being right now. With that in mind, this is just a 24-hour snapshot of like my Twitter feed of all of these folks telling me like rip website developers, AI can do a website for you. And here's 120 mind-blowing artificial intelligence tools. And I like this one, ChatGPT was just the starting point. More than 1,000 new AI tools were released in June. If you're not using AI, you're falling behind. You can imagine, and I'm a techie myself, but this produces a lot of anxiety, that sense of fear of missing out, of obsolescence that comes out anytime a new technology comes along. We're information specialists. We've seen this with Google. We've seen this with the rise of the internet and the metaverse. So just understand that there's a lot of folks that are trying to sell stuff. There's a hype cycle that's going on, and we need to kind of look past that. To bring us back down to earth, I'm going to take us back to the year 1994. We're going to look at the Today Show, 1994. Just for a little bit of context, the World Wide Web was 1993.
Back now at 56 past, I wasn't prepared to translate that as I was doing that little tease.
Oh, that's
that little
right.
mark with the A and then the ring around it.
At?
See, that's what I said. Katie said she thought it was about.
Yeah. Oh.
But I'd never heard it.
Around
I'd never heard it said. I'd always seen the mark, but never heard it said. And then it sounded stupid when I said it. Violence at NBC.
I heard around
big
or
fight
about.
up in the lunchroom the other
See,
week.
there it is. Violence at NBC. GE com. I mean,
Well, Allison should know.
what
do you
is
say to that,
internet
Allison?
anyway?
Internet is that
Massive computer
right,
network.
the one that's becoming really big now.
What do you mean? That's big. How does one? What do you write to it like mail?
No, a lot of people use it and communicate. I guess they can communicate with NBC writers and producers. Allison, can you explain?
So I'm going to stop there, but just to give you a sense of, think of the internet. That was an information revolution that came out, World Wide Web, WWW was 1993. This is 1 year later. And at the time, the internet was nerd stuff, right? And like you really needed to be a very big techie in order to know what the heck was going on. And a lot of folks had a very poor understanding of how it was. Just a few years later, most of us had websites. We didn't think about the internet nearly in the same way, right? It faded into the background. It became much more accessible. So understand that AI, it's coming out, it's confusing. It's certainly, going to revolutionize the information landscape in a way that the internet did, and it's an evolution of the internet in many ways. But if we just relax a little bit, it will be increasingly regulated, I would hope. It'll be something that we understand better and isn't as technical in nature because that user interface gets improved. With that being said, I just want to say, what is artificial intelligence? Just what is it when we talk about AI? According to IBM, they describe this technology as one that leverages computers and machines to mimic the problem-solving and decision-making capabilities of the human mind. And you'll notice I highlighted the words mimic and the human mind. It's that mimicry of our thought process, is how we process information and how we spit it back out. That is kind of the power of AI, and it's also the thing that's very concerning for us. It's that sense of mimicry that makes us uncomfortable with it as well. There's 4 types of AI, and there'll be people that say there's 7 types or 8 types. These are 4 basic types of AI, 2 of which, the first 2, are current and they're in use, and then the next 2 that are theoretical in nature. So it's reactive machines, limited memory, and then as we get to more sci-fi territory, we're talking theory of the mind and self-aware, and I'll go into them a little bit, particularly the ones that are current. So reactive machines, that first AI we looked at, that is AI that is capable of only using its intelligence to perceive and react to the world in front of it. And the example there is Deep Blue, that famous IBM machine that beat chess grandmaster in a game of chess. And if you notice, it only reacts to the here and now. It's presented with a question or a process. It certainly uses its database, but it only reacts to that immediate stimulus, which is interesting because, again, this is Deep Blue that played chess, and we think of chess versus checkers, right? That ability to kind of be predictive and to think moves ahead. That's not what it really did. That type of machine would just make the best possible move in that moment. Then we have limited memory, and that's what we're seeing now. And limited memory AI has the ability to store previous data and predictions when gathering information and weighing potential decisions. It's predictive. It also learns. It takes in new information. And how that works is kind of a 6-step process. You establish training data. So you put information into the system. You give it the machine learning model. That's the algorithm. That's the thing that discerns patterns, that connects you to the information. You ensure that the model can make predictions. you ensure that the model can receive human or environmental feedback. And if you think of something like, with ChatGPT, that human feedback is you talking to it. If you have a self-driving car, what might the environmental feedback be? Well, it might be the radar system on it. If you're not a great driver, or if it's not a great driver, then the impact detection is environmental data it would process. You store all of that information, that human and environmental feedback, as data. And that's where the system gets smarter, right? Because you then reiterate those steps above as a cycle. So that human and environmental data also goes back in to the original model. In the case of a medical AI, what might that initial training data be? Well, it might be things like the New England Journal of Medicine. It might be medical databases. That's all stuff that might be WebMD if it's scraping the internet. We also hear a lot about large language model AI, right? LLMs. And that's a term that refers to AI models that can generate natural language texts from large amounts of data. These large language models use deep neural networks, such as transformers, to learn from billions or trillions of words and to produce texts on any topic or domain. Now, that sounds like a word salad. That's a lot to process. But what are we really talking about? Well, when we say deep neural networks, again, that's that mimicry, that's human processing. It's meant to mimic our thought process. So it takes language in, you type or you talk to it. It processes that like we process language. You speak to it conversationally, and then it spits back stuff, text on any topic or domain. So if I'm asking a marketing question to ChatGPT, it understands my question, it processes it like if I was talking to a person, and then it speaks to me like I'm a person on that topic. We're also hearing a lot about generative AI. Now, generative AI, this is a type of artificial intelligence that's capable of producing text, images, or other media in response to prompts. So when we see things like ChatGPT, that's text, that's generative AI. When we see things like Midjourney, that makes images, it's taking natural language processing, but its output is images. Google has things now that can make music based on text prompts. You can make like really bad elevator music very quickly now. And another thing that we need to talk about is bias in AI. You will hear terms like algorithmic bias, and that's systematic and repeatable errors that create unfair outcomes, such as privileging one arbitrary group of users over another. Oftentimes, when we run into AI, it's this ignoring of bias. We tend to think of technology as somehow this neutral arbiter, right? It's taking people out of the equation. But as we saw, these are systems that are trained by us, that learn from us, that we oftentimes exercise the quality control. So they carry our biases, the biases of the creator. Give an example. Folks that were trying to check to see if ChatGPT was like, they're doing the cheat detection to see if ChatGPT did your paper, right? Those were pulling up false positives anywhere between 50 and 98% for people who English was not their primary language. It was assuming that they were using ChatGPT. Why? Well, because it was probably somebody that English was their first language that helped build that site, and that's how they were parsing sentence structure. We see gender biases popping up. ChatGPT, when it talks about a doctor, it tends to make it a man, and when it talks about a nurse, it tends to say it's a woman. We see that happen quite a bit. These things can perpetuate what already is. There have been companies that have, for example, done executive searches, decided that they had, it was almost exclusively male. So they created a neutral arbiter, an AI, that was supposed to process applications and resumes. But they found that it still was weighted where it was excluding women. If you were in the League of Women Voters, for example, anything that was potentially gendered somehow was tripping up that system. So we can't think of technology as neutral. And we need to understand that there's bias in this. Same thing with image generators. If I type in librarian, it's going to make a certain person that looks a certain way more often than not. If you type in criminal, it's going to show a certain type of person, potentially of a certain complexion. It tends to perpetuate existing stereotypes. Then in AI authorship, when we're typing in prompts, even when we're well-intentioned, we can get tripped up. And I will offer myself up as an example here. I was making an AI-generated image for PowerPoint, and it was a library, and it had the doors open, and the lights were shining, and it was kind of like this beacon. And literally, my prompt is a diverse group of people, of patrons walking into the library. That seems like a fairly inclusive prompt. But while I might have used the words diverse, I also used the term walking. Walking excluded anybody in a wheelchair. There was not a single person in this diverse group of people that was using a wheelchair. So we have our own biases. I typed in the way I go to the library. I walk to the library. So that's all floating out there. It's very difficult to manage because some of this is baked into the system. Some of it comes from us, intentionally or not. Now I'm going to move on to AI in the library itself, some of the ways it's manifesting itself. Earlier, we saw that there were 4 types of AI, right? There was a third type that was theory of the mind. That's where AI starts to think more like us, understands emotions. Theoretical, it doesn't exist, but it's on the pathway to number 4, which was self-aware. That's sentient AI, artificial intelligence that knows it is an artificial construct built by humans. And lots of sci-fi novels have been written about this in movies, but in truth, folks don't know what that actually looks like. But we're dealing with what's already here. So when I say AI is already in our libraries, well, how is it manifesting itself? Well, some early ways were in our collections. We have digital branches, right? We have websites, and those websites oftentimes are made up of multiple layers of third-party services. Think of all the digital collections you have. Think of all the different databases. Think about the learning software. And these vendors are using AI and have been using AI. For example, Overdrive, or Libby, as it's now called, they have been using AI to process customer support requests, all those FAQs and help checking stuff out. 30% of that was handled by AI, and that's going back to 2019. I imagine that number has grown. So those third parties that we're using is one of the early entry points of AI in libraries. Then, so many of us, Pew Research will tell you 1 in 4 houses now has a smart speaker. About 1 in 3 Americans use smart searches or voice-activated search daily. That's a form of AI and machine learning. And these smart speakers, this voice-activated search, is now connected to our collections. Things like Hoopla, for example, can work with an Amazon Echo. We're seeing AI narration popping up. If you go to Apple Books now, there are many books that are AI narrated. That is concerning. It's also potentially helpful when we talk about accessibility. Audiobooks are a very accessible option for people. Most books don't ever get an audiobook because of the cost of it. This potentially, can result in a lot more audio content, audiobook content, although it's certainly concerning for folks who narrate for a living. But increasingly, we're going to see that in our collections. And then many vendors are working on AI-powered collection development tools, things that can do things like conduct very, effective diversity audits on collections. Because they have contextual awareness, they can read all of the books, like a person would read a book and better understand the makeup of a book, not just subject headings. We need to know, though, that especially in present environment, the same tools that can be used for inclusivity can be used to exclude content people don't like. And with digital collections, that's particularly concerning because an empty physical shelf is a powerful image, right? But you don't see that with a digital collection when something is culled from a collection. We need to be aware of that potential. Earlier, I had mentioned some of that AI-powered support. Give you an example here.
Hey Google, talk to Libby.
Hi there, you can get a book recommendation or look for a book. What'll it be today?
Look for a book.
What book would you like to find?
Sophia of Silicon Valley.
Let's take a look. Do you mean Sophia of Silicon Valley by Anna Yen?
Yep.
You can borrow the ebook or audiobook or read its description. What would you like to do?
Borrow it, please.
The ebook and audiobook are both available to borrow. Which one would you like?
The ebook.
So you get the point there. That's one that's actually collection integration, right? You're working with your virtual assistant that are getting increasingly complex to borrow library materials. That same technology is also used most commonly for FAQs. The thing isn't working, or the app's not working, or I can't do this, or how do I return? Those types of queries are being handled by AI. But now I want to talk about some of the tools that are out there that our staff are experimenting with, right? And that our patrons certainly have access to. And what does that mean in a library setting? How might we use these things? So any conversation is always going to include ChatGPT, right? This is the one that kind of broke into the public consciousness. This is the Pokemon Go of artificial intelligence. If you recall, nobody really talked about augmented reality until everybody was, kicking in your doors looking for Pokestops and Pokegyms. So it's that same way where it's very accessible. It had 100 million users in the first 2 months of its existence until Facebook did their Twitter clone. Was it Threads? It was the fastest growing digital platform we had seen. It has launched an iPhone app, so it's certainly going to grow. It's a large language model. Okay, so it does natural language processing. You can speak to it in the vernacular. It spits back out like it's talking to a person. But this service has dubious origins that we need to be aware of. Functionally, when we talk about what is the database, what is the black box, where does the information come from? It's some amalgam of the publicly available internet, potentially even pirate sites, as we're seeing in some lawsuits now involving the company. So it scraped up a bunch of data. It then paid people, particularly in Kenya, to clean up the stuff, to remove hate speech, to exclude some of the stuff that could be potentially illegal. So it's like a snapshot, and it's functionally from about September of 2021. So it's not a live look at the internet. It's the internet as it existed at that time, based on the amount that they gathered up. It is something a little more complex than Hungry Hippo, but they scooped up massive amounts of information. It has a memory of about 8,000 words. So as you talk to it, as you do follow-up conversations, it remembers your instructions up until about 8,000 words, and then it begins to forget stuff. What I want to emphasize with something like ChatGPT is that it's a tool, it's not a source. It's a way of potentially finding information, but because you don't necessarily know where that information is coming from, I don't see it as a source. I like to use it on topics that I'm already familiar with, which maybe sound counterintuitive, right? Typically, we ask questions when we don't know the answer. I like to query it on things I already know stuff about, so I can actually assess the quality of information, rather than ask it something that I have no way of proving if it's hallucinating, if it's making it up, if it's correct or not. So it's very effective as a tool for things like brainstorming, for summarizing existing content that you yourself maybe have written and know what's going into the system and having it parse that information. It's good at editing and summarizing. And you can assign it roles. You can say you are a teacher teaching, literacy. Your students are from 5th grade reading level, and it understands those things and then applies it to your queries. I'm going to give you an example that's very library centric. So this is ChatGPT. You're going to see me very slowly typing in. For whatever reason, my typing speed goes down 80% when I know I'm on camera. So I am asking it for 10 titles for a library program. And this program is about dinosaurs. and my audience is school-age children. Oftentimes, this is a common thing, right? We're brainstorming names for a program. Now, my input hasn't been great, right? It's very general. I'm asking for 10 titles. It's about dinosaurs. My audience is school-age children. That's not much to go on. And you'll see, it's given me a bunch of different names. Dino Discovery, Unveiling the World of Dinosaurs, Jurassic Journey, Exploring the Age of Dinosaurs, on and on we go. Remember, it has a limited memory, so now I'm giving it a follow-up query. And I'm just saying, make the titles, use alliteration, very important in youth services. So it's thinking a little bit longer. And now I have dazzling dino discovery, delving into the world of dinosaurs. Some good alliteration there. It's going to give me 10 more titles, right? If you notice, my follow-up wasn't even a well-constructed sentence, right? But it understood what I was telling it. I just said, make the titles use alliteration. Not exactly the most eloquent way of speaking. So I am using it as a brainstorming tool. I'm going to do one follow-up to this. Let me see if I can jump ahead a little bit. Okay. So now I'm just saying, give me 5 more, but I'm asking it that they're literature based because I did not give it a very good sense of what my program was about, right? So now it's giving me 5 ideas that are literacy based. So now it's Dino Book Bonanza, Adventures in Literacy with Dinosaurs. Marvelous Mesozoic Tales, Reading and Writing with Dinosaurs. So it potentially gave me some stuff to work with. I know my audience. I know what my program ultimately is going to look like. I've guided this process. This isn't me saying, hey, write a term paper. This is a collaborative approach, and I think that's where AI is best used. We're also seeing now the beginning of AI-powered search. Bing is an early adopter, in part because Bing is powered by OpenAI. OpenAI is the company that does ChatGPT. Bing actually has a head start on this and has made Google very nervous about this technology. So think of it as conversational search. I'm going to talk to it like a person, not like it's a search engine. I don't have to worry about Boolean. AI has a tendency, though, to make stuff up, and that includes citations. Now, Bing actually provides citations when you ask it a question that can give things a veneer of respectability, but the citations themselves can be made up. When AI is wrong, it is confidently wrong. It doesn't say, I'm pretty sure. It just gives you the answer. I saw on Twitter somebody had said it's kind of like a mansplaining tool. It's like very confident, and it'll give you a word salad that, doesn't even consider your own qualifications in the topic. It just gives you stuff and is very confident about it. I like it as a pre-research tool in the same way that I like Wikipedia, and I can follow up on Wikipedia's sources and see if they're actually good sources or not. It's a good starting point for research. And it's connected to the live internet in a way that ChatGPT is not. It is the live internet. It's not a snapshot as of 2021. Many of these tools can do many things, and Bing can also now do image generation as well. You can ask it to create images for you, and it'll do it using DALL-E 2. So this is the new Bing. You'll notice it has 3 versions. It has a more creative, a more balanced, and a more precise. As a librarian, I would always think like more precise. I want the accuracy of the information is kind of important to me. But what I found is it tends to be more a matter of how verbose it's going to be. More precise just means it talks less. More creative means it talks more. I've at times found the more creative one to be more accurate because it gives me more options and more ways to steer the follow-up conversations. You're going to see I'm going to do a quick query. I got smart about this one. I did a copy and paste. So I very quickly wrote, find me 3 articles on augmented reality in education. It's searching the live internet for this. It's given me 3 options here. So I'm going to look into them. I give this a very cursory look, and I'm like, okay, this looks okay. But I want to show you how it can actually now, I'm going to provide it the URL, and I'm selling it to just summarize this. Remember, I'm doing pre-research here. I just want to see what's out there, what's potentially an avenue to follow up further. So I've asked it to summarize that same page. I didn't give it a word count. I can give it a word count. And it generates a quick summary. And you can imagine how just surveying some of what's out there, collecting some stuff, having some brief kind of abstracts built for me, and then following up and seeing what actually I can pursue further, getting a little more into what the sources are and how effective they are, how accurate. I like it as a tool. It's nice. And again, I'm asking it stuff that I can actually follow up on the accuracy of the information. That said, remember, I say ask it questions about stuff you're knowledgeable in. So like an egomaniac, I asked it about me. I said, like, tell me about me. And again, if I wasn't me, I would say, okay, look, it's given me some, a summary of who Nick Tanzi is, and it's given me some sources. What it actually did was there's two Nick Tanzis of note, one of which is a far wealthier person. It's the CEO. And it turned us into one person. We made a baby, and it is this version of what Bing thinks Nick Tanzi is. So it's made one impressive resume based off two people. So that's wrong. When it's cited correct information, it provided a source that it made up that doesn't actually say what it says. I mean, so even when the information's right, it created a source that's not right. And then finally, what I'll say is, even when it's gotten things right, it doesn't meet any of our definition of good scholarship. It's used stuff that's entirely autobiographical. It's taken my social media. It's taken a website of which I am the author. So that doesn't really meet the sniff test on on good journalism, right? If I said I was in the Avengers or I was GQ's Sexiest Man of the Year in 2008, it probably would have said those things because one of the three sources it was going to was my website. So really, when you want to see where the fault lines exist, ask AI about stuff that you are knowledgeable in. Use it as a tool, not as a source, and then it works as a productivity tool. But when you just ask it stuff that you're not in a position to critique the information it's giving back to you, it's not a good experience, or it's a wildly variable experience. When it hits, it's like magic. When it doesn't, it can go off the rails. Another thing we're seeing with AI now that's super accessible by us, by our patrons, is Google Workspace and artificial intelligence. As we know, Google has, it's Gmail, it's Google Docs, it's Sheets, it's Slides. It's the search engine itself that now has Google Bard. But within the workspace environment, within their cloud computing tools, there's a lot of good and neat things there. They have writing assistants now in Google Docs. You may need to turn it on as part of the Google Labs feature. It can do things like image generation within slides. That's its PowerPoint equivalent. When you're writing emails, you can use its AI to actually revise the tone of emails. And I know that's something we all kind of struggle with at times, right? I'm sure you've shown somebody else an email and said, hey, is this striking the right tone? Does this seem professional? Does this seem overly familiar? It's actually very effective at that stuff. And you know what's going into it because you're the author, right? You're just parsing tone. It can also be used in tandem with Google Workspace. I can be in Google Bard, their search engine. It can give me something that's a table in nature, and I can export it up to Sheets. I can save a chat session and send it to Google Docs. What I like about this is that any of us right now can make a burner Gmail account that's not really connected to us in any noticeable way, play with some of the AI features in this, and these same AI features now are coming to Microsoft, coming to Windows, it's coming to Microsoft Office. So if you're in a Google Workspace environment, you actually have the capacity to use it as a business tool. But as an individual user, you can just sign up for a free Gmail account, play with this stuff, and it puts you in a good position to navigate some of that natural language processing, that ChatGPT type functionality that is coming to Windows 11 very, very soon. This is both a good and bad example. It's a good example because you're going to see how it can parse text in Google Docs. A bad example because I'm having it like edit stuff after I've already published this on my website. So there's no going back. So I tend to struggle with my first sentence. I don't always have a great lead-in sentence. This sentence didn't really kind of match up what I was looking for. You can see I can elaborate, I can do custom and really give it a sense of, but I'm asking it just to rephrase this. It's taking that sentence, it's going to rephrase it. It gives me an option here. I like that option. I think it flows better. So I replace what I wrote with that. I know what I'm trying to say, right? I know what I wrote. I know what's in the system. And then I use my own eyes and say, does that match my tone? Or if it seems artificial, I might edit what they wrote further. I'm not saying, hey, Google, write me an article, about health initiatives in public libraries. That's not a good way to go. So text to image generators. This is, again, a form of generative AI. You write text to it, typically a prompt as it's called, and it gives you a visual representation of what you wrote. There are free and paid options. Canva is a good free one if you want to play with it. Not the most powerful tool, but it's nice. And Canva is using stable diffusion to generate. They have a text to image tool that any of us can use. You give it a description, it gives you 4 images, and then you choose the one that's the closest match, and it can upscale that image. Now, I know there's lots of copyright questions when we talk about generative AI and art. There's not a lot of answers. Some of the early answers are going to be case law. What we have here is somebody made a graphic novel called Zarya of the Dawn that was AI generated. US Copyright Office gave it copyright protection, then discovered it was AI generated and yanked the copyright protection, saying you cannot copyright something unless it is human authorship. So they said you can copyright the words that the author wrote. The images that the AI generated cannot be copyrighted. Now, might that change? Sure. So that answers one of our things, right? Can you copyright the stuff? Well, no, at least not right now. So that means like, hey, be careful about, I wouldn't make a library logo that you can't copyright using a generative AI at this point. What's this trickier question though is, where do these models come from? Well, things like Midjourney, their training model was they scraped a lot of the images they saw on the internet, okay, many of which are copyrighted. So they trained the AI using copyrighted material, and then it makes derivative works based on these things. And right now, copyright law doesn't really address that matter. It's clear that many of the generations were trained on copyrighted material. I can give it very specific instructions and say, give me a picture of a cat in the style of, and name a specific artist, and it will mimic that artist's style. It can only do that because it must have scraped that data, right? So that's the other concerning part. And legal and ethical are 2 different things. How might you use generative AI? Well, it is effective in marketing campaigns. Oftentimes we're looking for niche graphics that simply don't exist. So there is an option there to describe and to code the thing you want to see. It can also be in the same way that I use it as a brainstorming tool. It can be used just as a brainstorming tool, that it generates things that inspire you to other works. It can be used in tandem with other things like ChatGPT. If I'm a marketing expert in my library and I can start talking back and forth with ChatGPT to bang out like what might a marketing campaign look like, I can then work with a image generator to make things even where specific to platform and size it according to platform. So those are all ways to look into it, knowing that there are many unanswered questions here. Going to give you an example of Midjourney. So I'm on a Discord server right now using Midjourney. This is a paid service. So I'm using an Imagine prompt. That's how you prompt it to use the Midjourney bot. And I'm asking it to generate a portrait of a librarian cat. It's very important. Little follow-up, I let it know that they are seated within a library. And they're wearing a cardigan, as all library cats do. And I didn't give it much of an art style outside of that it's a portrait, right? Didn't say realistic, photorealistic, anything, no, I can talk natural daylight. To understand the power of this technology, I can describe a specific model Nikon camera and give it the illusion of having been taken by that camera. But this is a very generic, and this is in real time, mind you. So within 60 seconds, I will have 4 images, which I can then choose any one of them and make an additional 4 variations of any one of them or all of them, or I can upscale any of the 4. So I think it is about a 93 and it's 100% processed. So, and then you'll see I'll open it a little bit bigger. Haven't upscaled anything, but you can see it's very quick, high quality. And again, that's without any follow-up. That's without a really significant prompts. You can write paragraphs of descriptions to the system. So we've seen a little bit of how AI has kind of worked its way into libraries, some of the types of AI and the available tools that we can now play with. But what comes next? Well, I alluded to this when I was talking about some of the Google tools, right? That this is coming to Windows 11, for example.
You're muted.
Thank you very much. So what you kind of see there is within an operating system, a lot of the same functionality that we saw for several tools, right? Things like ChatGPT, that conversational search that we saw with Bing, that ability to summarize. So now you're talking to your OS a little bit, and it's bringing several different things together. And that's, again, why I think it's helpful to experiment with what's already there, namely those Google tools, so that when somebody flips a switch on this stuff, you can hit the ground running a little bit and also see where some of the problems lie, some of the things you don't want to do, understand what types of information we don't want to put into these systems. Because when we look at libraries, well, typically with a new technology, I always think about when we're talking policy, like what does the law say, right? And what do the terms of service say? The law doesn't say very much right now, and that's concerning to us. But what the law does say for us is oftentimes the confidentiality of patron records, right? That is something we can look at and apply to this technology. What else is coming? Well, we've been dealing with fake news, right? And misinformation. Well, now we're going to see the stuff on steroids. All of these images you see here are fake. They were generated with Midjourney. I have a fake picture of a fake moon landing. That's a little meta. Again, they used AI to generate a shutter speed and a camera type that looks of the era, right? They take advantage of our emotions, the strong feelings in our politics. So folks shared these images of the former president quite widely. But if they took some time to look, the source was a Twitter account called Butt Crack Sports, which is not exactly a bastion of journalistic integrity. The Pope one got shared widely. It's not necessarily a harmful image, but we need to be able to parse these things. So we need to reckon with AI and generative AI and the media literacy challenge it presents, because only one state in the country mandates K through 12 media literacy training. That's New Jersey. So we're already running behind on this stuff. It's part of the information landscape we have to parse. I want to show you something that's a little more positive. So AI is going to impact a lot of existing technologies. It is going to breathe quite a bit of life into things like augmented reality. I'll give you an example.
My mother speaks Mandarin, and I speak English, which is a strange thing.
他讲英文我可以听得懂，可是有时候我讲不来嘛。
We'd love to be able to share with you a new prototype we've been working on. You should be seeing what I'm saying, just transcribed for you in real time, kind of like subtitles for the world.
What we're working on is technology that enables us to break down language barriers, taking years of research in Google Translate and bringing that to classes.
Do you see me?
Oh, sí, sí te veo.
I'm actually looking straight into your eyes, and it seems like you're looking right at me.
Oh, sí, sí, estoy viendo lo que estás diciendo para guiarte.
Making access to information just instant and intuitive. By doing that, technology fades into the background, and we're more connected with the people and the things around us. Giving people the gift of communicating with any.
Okay, I unmuted myself. So you can see now the early iterations of augmented reality and wearable tech didn't make things easier. They made things more complicated. They didn't have the utility. Now the hope is with technologies like this solves a lot of problems, right? This helps break down language barriers. This helps from an accessibility standpoint. You're going to see things like generative AI and wearable glasses. Think about right now with augmented reality, for example. I can go to the IKEA app, right? And I can imagine what a table or chair might look like in my office. With AI and the power of generative AI, I can put augmented reality glasses on in the future. Now we're talking about, but in the very near future, I can describe in a space, show me an open office layout with 8 desks, along the perimeter of the room. And it will generate that in 360 where I can look in my space and see what that looks like. And I can have supplemental data right then and there. Things like the direction of the sun at a certain time of day. It's a boon for space planning and for other things. That's where all of a sudden wearable tech isn't like, oh, great, now I can crash my car because I'm getting like Instagram pop-ups when I'm trying to drive. It's solving problems. It's not creating new ones. Not to say that AI isn't going to create lots of new problems. And finally, what I want to kind of end on is I think the future of AI in libraries is one where we're going to be more involved. AI is a problematic technology. I think it's going to be more problematic absent our involvement in it. If we want to see ethical AI, it probably means we need to build it or at least have a big hand in it. If we think of AI like a collection, these things need continuous oversight. It needs a diversity of perspectives and authorship. we saw how bias can creep in. And if there isn't a diverse audience, if there isn't a diversity of opinion and content in these things, that's problematic. It requires curation and weeding like a collection has. We're going to see AI tools and, in particular, chat assistants and these types of things that have already creeped in with our third-party vendors, but potentially can help libraries. We talk about our virtual branches as being open 24/7. That's not really the case if there's no customer support after a certain period of time. And we always know with a new technology, listen, we're here to help patrons navigate a new information landscape. We're here to give people access. Early on, these tools are free because they're learning from us and they're training off of us. Inevitably, there's going to be haves and have-nots, and who has access to the high-quality AI and these powerful tools. And libraries can potentially provide them, given we have to look and see what conforms with our policy, what protects our patrons' privacy, because that's always been a way that we've distinguished ourselves from big tech, is we actually have some respect for patron privacy in a way that the Amazons of the world do not. So just some final thoughts. You need to view AI as a tool, not necessarily a source. Understand that there's not a lot of experts right now. There's folks that had a 10-minute head start playing with some stuff, right? And then they kind of hold it over you like they're a genius. We're all going to use these things in different ways. And that's going to be part of that learning process, as each of us with our diverse perspectives may find a better use for these tools, or one that's custom to us. And these diverse perspectives are important. Early priorities are going to be policy and procedure, thinking about, playing with these tools, playing with them safely, and then thinking about what is the impact to patron privacy. What tools can we invest in? What tools can we train staff on? What do the appropriate use cases look like for this stuff? And again, my sense that if we want ethical AI, it's going to be very hands-on for us. It's not going to be done. We're not going to have great results through avoidance. I think we'll have better results by not necessarily embracing the tools, but using them and seeing where the fault lines lie and what are the danger zones and how can we improve the product. I've left this link. I will be providing these slides. Those will get shared out. But there's a link here that's an AI resource list, things like AI petting zoo that you can play with, different links and articles you can read up on things like copyright as that develops. Many of the images I used today were created using Midjourney. For transparency, you will see here, these are the prompts that were used to generate each of the slides. Not too much jargon here, but the jargon that does exist, you'll see AR and then a ratio. That refers to aspect ratio. That's the sizing of the image. Generally, 16:9 is when I want it to be a full screen image. And then that's my contact information. At this point, I'm happy to take questions.
If anyone has questions, please feel free. You can unmute yourself or type them in the chat.
Hey, my question is more about I guess continuing education, or where I'm very interested in AI technologies, and where would you suggest we go for more education, more information as it would pertain to libraries?
Libraries, it's a little light. In the resource list, I also linked to other resource lists, one of which is 23 things to know about AI for libraries in the year 2023. That's from IFLA. So that's a helpful spot to stop at. I've also collected a bunch of tutorials, again, not library specific, but that were, on how to use some of these technologies, kind of a primer on ChatGPT, on Canva, on some of these AI tools. So those exist.
We have any other, I'm sorry, do we have any other questions or comments? I'll just read this comment Linda said, thank you, very informative. She looks forward to checking out the links, which I will make available to you all. Okay.
I hope I've answered everyone's questions.
We do have I do see a question here from Brad.
Okay.
Are there any red flags regarding patron privacy that you would like to share, such as withhold names?
So I basically go through like what is first off, New York state law is quite clear on what you can share, right? Absent a court order on patron records. So you have to think about what constitutes a patron record. So that's a big no-no in New York State. The other thing is just for library ethics, we don't disclose the content or frequency of library visits without the patron's consent. And so if I'm putting in personally identifiable information, that's a no-no. I don't want to put that in a system that harvests that data. So that would be things I would avoid. The other thing is with AI image generators, many of them have an option to upload an image, and you need to be aware of that becomes part of that training model that you probably don't want to put that photo of you and your kids into.
Great. Thanks, Nick.
Sure.
Right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today, and thank you, Nick. We really appreciate it. And you can look for an email from me with the resource links. All right. Thank you, Nick. Thanks, everybody.
All right, thank you.